I hesitated outside the weathered wooden doors of the funeral home, my hand trembling as I reached for the cold brass handle. The rumors had been circulating for years, whispered tales of unspeakable horrors that took place within these very walls. Yet, curiosity, tinged with a morbid fascination, propelled me forward, urging me to confront the chilling secrets that lay within. As the doors creaked open, a musty scent wafted through the air, mingling with the scent of decay. The dimly lit foyer greeted me, its antique furniture covered in a thin layer of dust. The atmosphere was heavy, thick with an oppressive silence that seemed to stifle even my breath. I ventured deeper into the funeral home, the air growing colder with each step. Shadows danced on the walls, their ethereal movements casting an eerie dance in the flickering candlelight. The sound of distant whispers tickled my ears, echoing through the empty hallways. My heart raced as I stumbled upon a room that held rows of closed caskets, their polished surfaces reflecting the dim light. As I approached one, a sudden gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candles in a swift, chilling motion. Panic gripped me as darkness enveloped the space, shrouding the room and its hidden occupants. In the darkness, I felt a presence, an unmistakable heaviness that settled upon my shoulders. The whispers grew louder, their words becoming discernible. They spoke of lost souls trapped between life and death, their anguished pleas for release echoing through the room. Fear clawed at my throat, but my curiosity kept me rooted in place. With trembling hands, I reached for a casket lid, hesitating for a moment before lifting it. The sound of rusty hinges echoed in the silence, and as the lid opened, I was met with an unimaginable sight, a lifeless figure, eyes wide open, staring back at me. I recoiled in horror, stumbling backward as I realized the truth: the funeral home was a mere facade, a cover for something far more sinister. These bodies were not at rest, they were vessels, inhabited by dark entities that thrived on the energy of the deceased. I fled from the room, my footsteps echoing through the corridors as I desperately searched for an exit. But the building seemed to shift and twist, its layout changing before my very eyes. Panic surged through my veins as I realized I was trapped, a pawn in a macabre game orchestrated by forces beyond my comprehension. Every room I entered told a different story, each more horrifying than the last. There was the embalming chamber, where the scent of formaldehyde permeated the air, mingling with the stench of decay. The mortuary office, where stacks of files revealed the dark secrets of the deceased. And the crematorium, where the flames danced with an unholy intensity, consuming not only bodies but also the souls trapped within. Time became a blur as I wandered the labyrinthine hallways, haunted by the screams and whispers that echoed in my mind. Faces appeared in the mirrors, contorted with anguish and despair. The funeral home had become a prison, a purgatory for lost souls and unsuspecting visitors alike. But just as despair threatened to consume me, I stumbled upon a room, a hidden sanctuary untouched by the darkness that permeated the rest of the building. It was a chapel, adorned with flickering candles and symbols of hope. A sense of peace washed over me as I stepped inside, as if this sacred space held the key to salvation. I sank to my knees, clutching a worn prayer book, and whispered a plea for deliverance. The air grew still, the whispers fading into silence. In that moment, I felt a surge of power, the strength of faith pushing back against the encroaching darkness. A blinding light filled the chapel, its brilliance banishing the shadows that clung to my soul. The funeral home trembled as the forces of darkness recoiled, their hold weakened by the power of light and belief. As the light subsided, I found myself standing outside the funeral home, the sun rising on a new day. The building loomed behind me, a relic of darkness that would forever haunt my memories. But I walked away, grateful for my escape, carrying with me a newfound understanding of the terrifying secrets that can hide behind the facade of death. For those who dare to venture into the realm of the funeral home, beware. The chilling horror that awaits within will leave you speechless, forever altering your perception of life and death. As I stepped through the heavy wooden doors of the old funeral home, a shiver ran down my spine. The air inside was stale, tinged with a scent I couldn't quite put my finger on. I had been hired as an apprentice embalmer, eager to learn the trade, but little did I know that my time in this place would be filled with chilling encounters and terrifying experiences that would haunt me for the rest of my days. The first incident occurred late one evening, as I was preparing a body for viewing. The room was dimly lit, the only source of illumination coming from a flickering fluorescent light above the embalming table. I was alone, absorbed in my work, when I heard a faint rustling sound coming from the corner of the room. Startled, I turned to investigate, but there was nothing there. I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me and continued my task. But as the days went by, the occurrences became more frequent and more disturbing. I would catch glimpses of shadows moving in the corners of my vision, but when I turned to face them, they vanished into thin air. Strange whispers echoed through the halls when I was alone, as if the very walls were whispering secrets that I wasn't meant to hear. Doors would creak open and shut of their own accord, and the temperature in the embalming room would plummet inexplicably, sending icy tendrils crawling up my spine. One particularly chilling night, as I was finishing up my work, I heard a mournful wailing coming from the crematorium. The sound was agonizing, filled with grief and despair. I cautiously made my way towards the source, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the crematorium doors, the wailing abruptly stopped, leaving behind an eerie silence that made my skin crawl. I pushed open the heavy doors and was greeted by an empty room, the cremation oven cold and lifeless. I tried to confide in my fellow co-workers about the strange happenings, but they dismissed my claims, chalking it up to an overactive imagination. They had become so desensitized to the peculiarities of the funeral home that they had stopped noticing the bizarre occurrences altogether. I was left feeling isolated, trapped in a nightmare that no one else could see. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to venture into the basement. The basement was a labyrinth of narrow corridors and rooms filled with forgotten belongings. As I cautiously descended the stairs, a sense of foreboding washed over me. The air grew thick and suffocating, and the faint smell of decay clung to every surface. Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps echoing through the darkness. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. The footsteps grew closer, louder, until they were right behind me. I turned, expecting to see someone there, but the corridor was empty. I couldn't take it anymore. The fear and uncertainty had consumed me, and I knew I had to leave. But as I made my way towards the exit, a figure materialized before me. It was a pale, gaunt woman dressed in a tattered white gown, her eyes sunken and lifeless. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stumbled back in terror, unable to tear my gaze away from her haunting figure. She slowly raised a skeletal finger and pointed towards a door, her expression filled with sorrow and anguish. Without thinking, I followed her silent command. The room beyond the door was a small, forgotten chapel. As I entered, the door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into darkness. Panic welled up within me, and I fumbled for a light switch. When the feeble light flickered on, I gasped in horror. The walls were lined with coffins, each one occupied by a lifeless body. Their eyes were open, staring directly at me, as if accusing me of trespassing on their eternal rest. I screamed, my voice echoing through the chapel, and the coffins began to shake violently. The lids flew open, and the corpses rose from their eternal slumber, their rotting hands reaching out towards me. I stumbled backward, desperate to escape, but the door remained firmly shut. The decaying figures advanced, their moans and guttural cries filling the air. I closed my eyes, prepared for the inevitable, but instead, I felt a rush of wind and the sensation of being lifted off my feet. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying on the ground outside the funeral home, the cold night air providing a stark contrast to the horror I had just witnessed. I stumbled to my feet, shaken to the core, and vowed never to set foot in that cursed place again. To this day, I am haunted by the memories of my time in that funeral home. The inexplicable events I witnessed and the terror that gripped my soul will forever be etched into my mind. The funeral home holds secrets that should never be disturbed, and those who dare to enter its doors may find themselves trapped in a nightmare from which there is no escape. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Groaning, I reached over and grabbed it, squinting at the screen to see who was calling at this ungodly hour. It was my friend, Lisa. "Hello," I mumbled, my voice still heavy with sleep. "Jessica, you won't believe what just happened to me," Lisa said, her voice trembling with fear. "What's wrong?" I asked, suddenly wide awake. "I went to that funeral home down the street to pay my respects to my late uncle. But something isn't right. I saw things, Jessica. Terrible things." My heart raced as I listened to Lisa's shaky voice. I told her I'd be right over and threw on some clothes. Within minutes, I arrived at the funeral home, a grand old building that had been in operation for decades. The dimly lit entrance gave off an eerie vibe, but I brushed off the unease and entered. Inside, the air felt heavy, suffocating. Lisa stood near the entrance, her eyes wide with terror. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward a hallway, away from prying eyes. "I was in the viewing room, alone with my uncle's casket," Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. "I swear, I heard someone whispering." It was like a low, raspy voice coming from the shadows. My skin prickled with goosebumps as I tried to calm her down. We decided to investigate together, to uncover the truth behind these terrifying occurrences. As we ventured deeper into the funeral home, the atmosphere grew more oppressive. The walls seemed to close in around us, and the air turned icy cold. We entered a room filled with rows of empty caskets. Dust-covered shelves lined the walls, each holding urns and funeral mementos. Lisa shivered beside me, her eyes darting around nervously. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room. We spun around, searching for the source of the noise. A broken vase lay shattered on the floor, its fragments scattered across the room. "Is someone here?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Before Lisa could respond, the sound of footsteps filled the hallway outside the room. We exchanged fearful glances and pressed ourselves against the wall, hoping to remain unseen. As the footsteps grew louder, my heart raced faster. The door creaked open, revealing a tall, shadowy figure. It wore a tattered suit, its face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Frozen in fear, we watched as the figure moved with an unnatural grace. It floated, rather than walked, gliding through the room as if weightless. Lisa clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Suddenly, the figure stopped and turned its head toward us. I gasped as its eyes, glowing a sickly shade of green, met mine. It opened its mouth, emitting a bone-chilling laugh that reverberated through the room. We broke into a sprint, racing through the maze-like hallways, desperately searching for an exit. But no matter which way we turned, we found ourselves back where we started. Panic consumed us as the figure continued to pursue us relentlessly. Its haunting laughter echoed in our ears, driving us closer to the edge of sanity. Finally, we stumbled upon a narrow staircase leading down to the basement. With no other option, we descended into the darkness, the figure hot on our heels. The basement was a labyrinth of tunnels and storage rooms, filled with the stench of decay and death. We darted through the darkness, gasping for breath, our hearts pounding in our chests. Finally, we burst through a door and found ourselves in the main viewing room. The figure emerged from the shadows, its sinister smile sending shivers down my spine. We were trapped, cornered with nowhere to run. But just as all hope seemed lost, the figure suddenly froze, its glowing eyes fading to darkness. The room fell silent, and we watched in disbelief as it vanished into thin air. Gasping for air, Lisa and I stumbled outside, collapsing onto the dewy grass. We had escaped the clutches of the funeral home's terrifying presence, but the memory of that night would haunt us forever. From that day forward, the funeral home remained abandoned, its dark secrets hidden away. But we knew the truth, and it would forever linger in our nightmares. The funeral home, a place meant for final farewells, had become a nightmarish portal to the other side, filled with vengeful spirits and unexplained horrors. And so, the tale of our terrifying encounter serves as a warning to all who dare to enter the desolate halls of that forsaken funeral home. Beware the whispers in the shadows, for they may be more than just the echoes of the departed.